Season 10, Episode 7 of Alone. We are creeping towards winter. Temperatures were getting close to around freezing. We did see a little teeny tiny bit of ice on the edge of the lake. And like this season's getting pretty interesting because, you know, you could make an argument for all 5 of the remaining contestants to have a legitimate shot at winning the season. And that makes things more interesting to me. We want things to be competitive. We want things to be exciting. And I think that after we had that wave of, it was like 5 competitors tapping out in 5 days, this season is turning out pretty good. So let's jump into it. We'll start off with Alan. He's lost 37 pounds so far. That when that's shown on the screen, usually it is a sign that things aren't going well for that individual. Sometimes it means that a tap out is a days or a week away, like on their next medical check. So I don't know how concerned we should be about that. You know, he is still trying to produce food. We do see him get a little bit of food this week. You know, in my opinion, he still has a shot of turning things around and putting in a good effort to win the season. So he started off with a duck in his gill net. And while you are allowed to kill duck on this season, you are not allowed to catch them in your net. So he was forced to cut it free of his gill net and in the process do heavy damage to his gill net. So we had to pull that out of the lake and eventually repair it. We did get to that interesting scene of the duck just kind of chilling out after it was cut loose from the neck. Like it just kind of like gave up and was like, hey man, you caught me. So we see Alan actually just straight up pick the duck up from the lake. Like it just seemed totally chill. It was kind of a cool little moment. So yeah, he ends up fixing the net and not quite ready to put the gill net in the water yet. He wants to go exploring and heads to a new area for fishing. It was a pretty big endeavor for him. I think it said it was about a kilometer journey, which, you know, not too bad, but, you know, he kind of goes out there. Didn't seem like he was able to fish that long. Did get some bites. Did get to see some moose tracks on the way. It loses a fish like 2 feet from the shore, but then he had to head back. So, you know, those long journeys at this point, they leave a little to be desired because so much energy is spent traveling, getting to this new location, and then Alan's left with like limited time to actually do anything to recoup those calories that he put in. You'd almost like to see them have some way of at least spending like one night in the area. You know, I don't know how feasible that is. Maybe being able to just take your tent and a tarp and find some location where you can hole up for the night and, you know, explore the area again in the morning. But, you know, pretty tempting to go back to your main shelter and rest up there instead. So yeah, no fish at the new location. So he heads back to his regular fishing spot. After doing some adjustments to his lures, he decides he's going to put a smaller hook on it because he thinks that might give him a better shot at catching fish. And we do see him catch a small lake trout before a giant pike steals his lure. A little bit of contrast from what we saw from Wyatt this week. Alan loses his lure and he's just not that torn up about it. I thought it was kind of a cool experience seeing that giant pike rip the lure off of his line. So that's it for Alan this week. Let's jump over to Melanie. So she's heading off back to the blueberry patch and only gets about a fifth quarter of the way there and has to turn around and go back because she has no energy. She was hoarding up food and basically starving herself, so she ends up having to hunker down and eat some more food to get her energy back up before attempting to go back to the blueberries again. And this time she is successful and looks like she gets a nice haul of blueberries. Hard to say from what we saw how much of that blueberry patch is left, but I would say similar to Alan going to his new area, I would have loved to have seen Melanie, try to figure out a way to be able to spend the night at the blueberry patch to get up in the morning, finish all that harvesting before heading back home. Let's jump over to Wyatt. He probably had the most interesting week out of anyone. We start off with seeing him repairing his gill net. We find out that he cut himself on a piece of wood about a week ago and was hiding it. We saw him squeezing pus and blood out of the wound. And from the initial season preview, it looks like at some point we're going to get to see him pull a chunk of something out of that wound in his arm. So, Wyatt seems to think that everything's all better at this point, but the previews would tell us otherwise. Wyatt was worried about getting pulled from the show over it. He treated it, I believe he boiled some spruce pines, put some sap on it, and honestly it didn't look like a big deal. It looked like he'd done a good job with keeping the wound clean and making sure he didn't get an infection. The reindeer demon. This is apparently Wyatt's fourth lure of the season and his final treble hook. We see him catch another beautiful lake trout. I think he said it was probably like 6 pounds, and that's another monster fish for Wyatt. So he has to have a decent store of fish going. As basically he loses that lure immediately afterwards, and was not very happy about it. He wasn't calm and collected like Alan. He was ready to lose his mind over losing the lure, because that is also his final treble hook. And it was on this day where he woke up and basically had like an epiphany or something and thought today things are going to change. Goes out, catches that fish, loses the lure, heads into the forest, nails a grouse, immediately afterwards nails a squirrel, gets over to his gill net, and there's a whitefish in it. And honestly, I didn't even know that there was whitefish in Reindeer Lake. So he caught a fish that I wasn't even aware was there. So things are looking pretty good for Wyatt. Out of everyone, he has to have the most food stored up. We do have the concern with the wound on his arm, but it seems like he's taking care of it. So don't know if that is going to be a negative factor for him moving forward, or if something that he's already gotten past. But what did he catch? 10 pounds of fish today, plus a grouse, plus a squirrel. Pretty amazing. That's 2 weeks in a row where Wyatt by far got the most food out of everyone on the show. Next up, we've got Taz, and we see him immediately building a door after the storm, and that tells me it wasn't very pleasant in his shelter during the storm. We also see him build a chair, and I thought this was weird because we kind of ended with him having maggot-infested food last week, and after the storm, I was like, surely he's gone to the food cache, but he hadn't. Finally gets there, and all of his food is infested with maggots, and he decides he's going to clean it up and cook it to oblivion, then eat it. And my stomach was turning watching him eat that food, the maggot-infested food. I know he was trying to not consume maggots, but that was a little much for me. We see him also he moves his food cache closer to his shelter, and immediately loses another half trout to what we assume is marten in his area. And then that's a lot of food lost for Taz this season. And then we do see him recover his gill net later in the episode, but he's going to have to repair it. And late in the episode, we find out that he has lost 44 pounds so far. So like I said with Alan, that's often a bad sign for competitors when they're showing the weight loss, because it generally means that, you know, a medical check or a tap out could be imminent. So next week we were kind of foreshadowed a tap out as my cat with his nice cone pops into view. Could be Alan or Taz as our individual to tap out next week. Lastly, we've got Mikey. Mikey, he didn't show up till like well into the second half of the episode. We see him making some toys for his son, and the top that he made actually seemed pretty good. He spun that on the camera case, and it went for quite a while. So, you know, pretty good for Mikey. And like at that point when they were showing that, I was thinking, well, he must be up to nothing. But then they just pop on the screen, oh, Mikey's shot 3 grouse since the storm. And it's like, why wouldn't you show that? Like, that seems like a pretty important few moments for Mikey, especially after he went so long with no food. But we don't get to see it. We did get to see him shoot a squirrel, and apparently he loves eating squirrels. And that's all we saw from Mikey. So given how much food he harvested over the course of this episode, and all we saw is him shoot a little squirrel, I don't really like that. You know, I want to see all of that, you know, even if it's just like a quick montage over the past 3 days of Mikey and his grouse, because I mean there has to be at least some sort of footage. Maybe it wasn't that exciting, but show us something. But anyways, that's going to wrap things up for our recap for the week. As always, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you later.